Okay, looks like we are live. Spend some time letting everyone else come into the program, as I appreciate everybody. Hopefully you join us. I didn't send out an email about this. I apologize to everyone. I was working on a story today that took me right up until the very end. But right up until the time that I needed to get online, so I did not send out an email to let everyone know that we were going to be doing this tonight. So hopefully people show up. But we will soldier on, and I appreciate everybody joining us. So we'll take a few minutes to get involved here. Take a few minutes for everyone to get into the chat. If you are here, say hello. I'll say hello to you as well. Love to have you let me know who is watching this evening on the different channels. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, and TikTok tonight. TC on TikTok says new glasses. Well, they're not new glasses. I just do this. See, I can change the different face plates. I got a bunch from standing upstairs, but I do keep a couple right near my desk. So, I mean, I've got the blue ones too. See, right here. Put the blue ones on if I want. Also take the blue ones off and then put the white ones on. I've got some turquoise ones. I've got some American flag ones. I should probably break those out as we get closer to the election, but I like wearing the pirate skulls, skull and crossbones. Those I think fit my aesthetic right now. So yeah. TC says secrets exposed. No, I'm an open book. I'll tell you anything you want to know. You have any questions, feel free to ask. I mean, I'm accountable to you after all. Okay, well, let's get started. Oh man, is there a lot to talk about. There is a ton to talk about tonight. Ballots have hit the mailboxes, or they're starting to hit mailboxes this week. I got my ballot this week. I got it today, actually. And in the interest of full transparency, I am a registered Republican voter, but I requested a ballot in the Democratic primary in Utah's 1st Congressional District. So I'll be voting in that primary, even though I am not a registered Democrat. I got that ballot in the mail today. But we've got a lot to talk about. First of all, by way of introduction, if you don't know who I am, my name is Brian Schott. I am the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch. You'll find us online at utahpolitics.news. That is a reader-supported news outlet, independent journalism here in Utah. And everything I do is possible because of my subscribers. If you want to support independent journalism here in Utah, you can go to my website, utahpolitics.news. Sign up for my newsletter. It's free. I got a little hair in my eye here. Sign up for my newsletter. It's free. If you want to support what I do financially, because that's how this is possible, you can become a paying subscriber. Subscription is like $55 a year. That's $17 a day. You get some extra stuff there, or you can throw some money in the tip jar. That's how this is all possible. But I'm an independent journalist, and I've been covering Utah politics for more than 25 years, and I've got a lot to talk about tonight. And I want to hear from you as well, but there is so much going on. We're going to talk about the latest in the data center. Senate President Stuart Adams yesterday sent out a letter demanding that Kevin O'Leary reduce the size of the Box Elder County data center by 75%, from 40,000 acres to 10,000 acres. And he wants more transparency and more conservation methods. And when I saw that, I had to laugh, because he's the one who approved the deal in the first place as the chairman of MIDA. That is 100% a campaign stunt. That was campaign panic is what it was. Because he is facing a very tough re-election bid. He's got two candidates, two Republican challengers for the GOP primary. And this tells me that this data center issue has blown up in his face. And that's why he sent this letter. And the timing, the timing is so suspect. Gee, do you think he sent it? It couldn't have gone better for him or looked more like a panic move, because he sent it the day before ballots start hitting mailboxes. Ballots were mailed out yesterday, and then he sends out this letter demanding changes. Then Kevin O'Leary does a bunch of interviews with Utah media where he says Stuart Adams was his partner in this. So Stuart Adams approved it. And forgive me if I'm skeptical about it and think that, where is the enforcement methods? What are the enforcement mechanisms in this demand to change the parameters of this massive hyperscale data center up in Box Elder County? Stuart Adams can't demand anything. He's the Senate president. He is in no position to demand anything. I mean, he can make the demands, but there's nothing that says that he can enforce them. And there's nothing that says that Kevin O'Leary has to listen to him. Now, he's softened on that a little bit after I think he realized that Adams is in political trouble. But make no mistake, this whole thing this letter was because Adams is in political trouble. He sees a danger to his reelection bid. That's the only reason he did this. That's why he's spending thousands of dollars on Facebook ads, AI-generated Facebook ads, I might mention. But he knows that he could lose, which would be remarkable, because a sitting Senate president has not lost since, I think the last one was Steve Polton, who lost to Patrice Arent. I think that came right after the 2011 redistricting, maybe. Could have been the 2001 redistricting. I'll have to look that up. But what happened was Patrice Arent was redistricted out of her House seat. She was thrown into another district with another Republican, or excuse me, another Democrat. Didn't want to run again, and so she decided to challenge Senate President Polton and beat him, shocked him and what she did is she just outworked him. It might have been 2011. I want to say maybe the 2012 election, because the redistricting was in 2011. But that was the last time this happened. Senate presidents don't lose. Nathan Detroit on Twitch has a great comment. He says, I think Stuart Adams keeps mixing up Senate President and God Emperor of the state of Deseret. Yeah, I mentioned that when I did a quick video yesterday when this letter came out, that Adams has no authority to enforce these demands that he's made of Kevin O'Leary. He's not the governor. He thinks he's the governor sometimes. I think he wishes he was the governor, but he's not the governor. He doesn't have that kind of authority. So he can make all the demands he wants, but that doesn't mean that Kevin O'Leary has to listen to him. But also we've seen, as I said, O'Leary has sort of softened his stance on whether or not he's going to... At first he was upset that Adams was making these demands, but I think someone got to O'Leary and said, hey, Adams is in trouble. Politically. And that's the only rational way to read this letter from Adams. That's the only rational way to read this letter, is that he is in political trouble. That's why it came out the day that ballot started to hit. This issue is hitting him hard, and he's trying to hang on to his seat. And that's why he sent it. Al R. Howe on Instagram says, just subscribe. Thanks for the reporting you do. Thank you, Al. Hope it's Al. Appreciate it. I was trying to bring up your profile so I could get your actual name. Can't do that on Instagram. Apologize, but thank you so much for subscribing. You're the one who it's people like you who allow me to do what I do. I published an investigative piece today that took me quite a bit of time to run down some of the paperwork, and we'll go into that a little bit. I published that this afternoon about this mysterious pack that just popped up that's hitting Blake Moore. So we can talk more about Stuart Adams and his, you can't read it as anything other than a panic, that letter he sent to Kevin O'Leary yesterday. We can talk about that. We can talk about the debates, and I have some thoughts about that. We can also talk about what's happening in the 1st Congressional District primary. Nate Bluin released a poll yesterday like he said he would. And surprise, surprise, his poll showed that he was the leading progressive candidate, and he reiterated his call to get the other progressive candidates to fall in line behind him so that they can coalesce and defeat Ben McAdams. So I have some thoughts about that. We can talk about that. Governor Spencer Cox had his nominees for the Utah Supreme Court today. None of them have ever been a judge, the two nominees. We can discuss that as well. So there's a lot on the table as we are hitting election season. As I said, ballots starting hitting mailboxes today. Nathan Detroit on Twitch says, I disagree. Governors come and go, but Senate president is the usually quiet power behind the throne. Adams is way out over his skis, becoming way too powerful. I'll agree with you in a little bit. I think Adams is arguably the most powerful Senate president we've had for a while. Lane Beatty was extremely powerful. Wayne Niederhauser, I don't think exercised his authority. I don't think any of them have really exercised their authority the way that Adams has. Adams has become very imperial. And by imperial, I mean abrogating more or bringing more power to himself, allocating more power to himself. So I think Adams is and I think that just goes with this entire legislature becoming more imperial, where they do what they want and they see themselves as we're supposed to have 3 co-equal branches of government, but the legislature is more equal, or I guess the most equal among the equals, or the one that has the most authority. Nathan Detroit says, Cox is the perfect milquetoast governor to let Adams run the show. True. You won't get any argument from me on that. I don't think Adams would have been able to pull this with Gary Herbert. I don't think Adams would have been able to pull this kind of thing he certainly would not have been able to pull it with John Huntsman. Not at all. Or Leavitt. Those governors were very forceful, in how they ran the state. So I don't think Adams would have been able to do this, but it's a big combination of Spencer Cox being very milquetoast, not wanting a confrontation with the legislature, and Adams really leaning into his authority. And this data center issue has blown up in his face. It really has. I don't think he saw this as the issue it was. He saw it as a great economic development issue. But then at the end of the day, it turns out that there was a massive reaction, negative reaction to that. Have you seen his ads? I'm not going to bring one up tonight, but have you seen his ads? His ads are AI generated. And in one of them, it shows him like moving boxes around. And I can't tell if he is AI or if they put his face on. Anyway, there's a lot of AI in these ads. And there's one where he's moving boxes around that are like his accomplishments. And if you look really close at the top of one of the stacks of boxes, one of the boxes says MITA. It's right at the top. I'm like, oh, that's a cell phone. That's a huge problem. You don't want to be highlighting MIDA because that little known state agency, people didn't know much about it before this data center thing, and now they know a hell of a lot about it, and they don't like it. But that MIDA thing was there. I don't know if they're still running it, but I thought that was really, really funny. Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, if he were to stop being Senate president, would he still chair MIDA? How is that chair selected? He was appointed by Governor Huntsman in 2008. MIDA was created in 2007. He was appointed by Governor Huntsman. So I would assume he would keep his seat on MIDA unless there was an outcry to get rid of him or for him to step down. So I don't think if he loses his seat in the Senate, he loses his position on MIDA. He could easily keep it. When he was appointed to MIDA, he was actually the head of the Utah Transportation Commission. He was not in the Utah House at the time. He was in the Utah House for a while and then decided not to run for re-election. And he was appointed the head of the Utah Transportation Commission. And then he was also appointed the head of this brand new entity, MIDA, or appointed to this brand new committee, MIDA, when it was created. It was created in 2007. He was appointed in 2008. So I don't think that he would keep it there. The way MIDA works is there's 7 voting members. 5 of them are appointed by the governor. 1 is appointed by the Senate president. 1 is appointed by the Speaker of the House. And then the non-voting member, that is supposed to serve as the executive director. So I don't think he would lose that. TC on TikTok says Davis County has 4 seats on MIDA. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that. MIDA has been doing pretty much anything they want behind the scenes for years. And people didn't know what they did. People weren't paying much attention. But this data center thing, like I said, has really blown up in their face, and it's causing a lot of problems. Nathan Detroit says, imagine a world where Schultz has a chance as governor. Would he work with or push back on Adams? I think Schultz has to work on getting his name ID out there first. There's a reason why he has been distancing himself from this whole data center thing, where he's been saying, I didn't have anything to do with it, and I think the people should have a vote. He's doing that because he wants to run for governor. He knows how politically toxic this issue is. Adams just didn't read the room correctly. And it's biting him in the butt. And that's why he sent that letter out to Kevin O'Leary, demanding, and I'm going to put demanding in quotes, but demanding that they scale back or cut down on it by 75%. Somebody on TikTok, Feathers and, sorry, I'm trying to do this here. Trying to look at your Feathers and Beaks on TikTok says, he mentions the Salt Lake Tribune. Can they run a poll? Well, I'm not affiliated with them, so I don't know. Polls cost money. I doubt they will. If I could afford it, I would. It's getting kind of late to run a poll. If you wanted to run a poll, you would have to put it out. Like the latest it could come out would be last week, because people have returned their ballots already. Like, this is now a game of communicating to a smaller and smaller universe of voters. And because in these primary elections, people are starting to send their ballots back in. They've already made up their minds. Campaigns can track who has returned their ballots. They have access to that data. So they know who's returned their ballots and who hasn't. And so when someone has returned their ballot, they stop communicating with that voter because there's no reason to message to them anymore. And so polls, I don't know what good polls do at this point. If I would have had the money, I would have tried to find a way to hire my friend. And I know he's my friend, but I think he's the best pollster. He's nailed everything in Utah since he's been doing it. Noble Insights, Noble Predictive Insights. You can find them online at Noble, Noble, predictive.com. And as I said before, in 2024, he nailed every race in Utah. He got it exactly on the button or extremely close. So I would like to, if I had the money, I would have done that. And I thought about it. But part of the problem is this new congressional district, these new district boundaries, it's difficult to get your sample right and communicate to the right universe of voters, because everything has changed and everything was set up for the old maps. Jason DeZort on Facebook says, don't forget MIDA was a significant force behind the new expansion at Deer Valley. Exactly. They have put a significant amount of money behind that, or again, given significant benefits to the developers behind the Deer Valley expansion. So yes, but that's when nobody was paying attention to what they were doing. Now they're paying attention to them. And that's why it has become politically toxic for Adams. TC says we got to find a big donor for Brian. I don't know if I'd want a big donor, because that usually comes with strings attached. And like I said, I'm independent and I don't really want strings attached, unless the string is you run a poll. You hire a pollster and run a poll. And that would be the only string that I think would be acceptable, because, I keep saying I don't have any corporate interest funding what I do. I don't have any billionaires funding what I do. And that way I don't have, people telling me what I can and cannot cover. I'm accountable to my readers, accountable to my subscribers. R. Cameron B on TikTok says, if Adams is not reelected, will he still serve on the MIDA board? Does one come with the other? As I answered before, I think they are independent of each other. I think if Adams does lose his reelection bid, which that letter yesterday tells me is entirely possible, if he does lose his reelection bid, I think he retains his spot on the MIDA board. Oh, we got a lot of other stuff to get to. Anyway, if you have questions, if you have comments, if there's anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat, and I will get to you as quickly as possible. I'll get to those comments. I'll try to answer your questions and comments, but there is so much going on. Katie Did It on YouTube says, have you seen the O'Leary interview? Adams has a new enemy. He's done several interviews. There was one on the with the Salt Lake Tribune. That was the first one, talking about where he seemed angry. But I saw another one, I believe it was ABC4, where he seems to have backed off a little bit and says now he wants to work with Adams on this. And what that tells me is someone got to him and said, hey, Adams is in trouble politically. This is blowing up in his face. And here's the thing that nobody's really acknowledging. There's nothing that says that whatever deal they come to, whatever demands Adam says, that he has to stick to it. This is a political ploy because he's got an election coming up and he is in trouble politically. And he's doing what he can to try and defuse this issue because it has become completely toxic to him. And it is doing some major damage. It is doing some major damage to him. And that's why he sent that letter. Let's talk a little bit about the 1st Congressional District primary race in the Democratic primary. Last week, Nate Bluin came out and said that he was going to commission a poll. And if it showed that he was not the leading progressive candidate, you have 4 candidates in the race. Ben McAdams, who is a centrist, more establishment candidate, and then 3 self-described progressives. You've got Nate Bluin, the state senator, you've got Liban Mohammed, and you've got Michael Farrell. All of them are self-described progressives. And Bluin said that he was going to fund a poll, and if he was not the leading progressive candidate, he would drop out. And as I pointed out, you don't make that kind of promise unless you know that you're going to be the person who is the leading progressive candidate. What this was a way to try and pressure the other candidates to get behind him. And surprise, surprise, they weren't going to do it. Mohammed and Farrell were not going to do it. Well, we got the results of the poll yesterday, and As completely expected, Ben McAdams is the front runner, about 37% support. 36% solid support, 1% lean. Nate Bluin was at 26% solid support, 1% lean, so he's at 27. So McAdams at 37, Bluin at 27, Laban Mohammed at 12, Michael Farrell at 7, and then undecided at 17. And Bluin used this to say, hey, look, I'm the one who's best positioned to defeat Ben McAdams. And he's kind of got a point, because if you look at it as the McAdams vote versus the not McAdams vote, the not McAdams vote is bigger than the McAdams vote, because if you add it all up, it's about 45% of voters who do not support McAdams, compared with 37% who do support McAdams. So he's got a bit of a point. Now, those numbers are all the numbers for McAdams and Bluin are almost completely unchanged since March, because there was a poll that came out, Data for Progress, in March that showed McAdams at 36%, Bluin at 23%. So essentially unchanged between those two. That poll also had candidates who were no longer in the race, and most of the voters who were voting for those other candidates either went to Mohammed or or Farrell. Now, unsurprisingly, Mohammed and Farrell are not going to drop out of the race. We had the press conference, or Bluin released the poll numbers at a quickly called press conference at Liberty Park on Monday morning. What I found interesting is Laban Mohammed showed up to the press conference. He stood in the back. He didn't want to talk to the press, which I thought was weird, but he was there. He wanted to hear what Bluin had to say. Kind of a ballsy move, but it was interesting that he didn't talk to the press. But they're trying to frame this, or Bluin supporters are trying to frame this as, if you don't vote for Nate, it's essentially a vote for Ben McAdams, because those all three progressive candidates are splitting the vote. And that's what we had assumed. And this poll just confirms that they are dividing up the not McAdams vote. Now, there is a sizable chunk of undecided voters. And if you dig into some of the internals of the poll, it shows that, a good chunk of voters for both Bluin and McAdams are kind of like soft support. They're not hard support. So they are gettable. So Bluin doesn't need the votes of the other two progressive candidates. And it's not for certain that those candidates or those voters who support Laban Mohammed and Michael Farrell would automatically go to Bluin if they were to throw their support behind him. That's not for certain. I don't think it's an easy one-to-one thing. But in the internals, it shows that there's a good chunk of McAdams voters who are soft supporters, so they are actually gettable by Bluin. I don't think he has the resources to run an ad campaign to try and convince them and to message to them. Because if you look at another one of the internals in the poll, and that was the name recognition, McAdams has about 92% name recognition, while Bluin's at 74%. That's a huge gap. It's about an 18-point gap in name recognition. And that's a pretty big gap when we're this close to the election. And I just don't think Bluin has the resources to make the kind of messaging push he would need to try and pry those voters who are soft supporters of McAdams away from him. So that's one of the biggest problems he has. Lorraine on Instagram says, with the Bluin campaign releasing the polls, is it done so that voters think he'll have a better chance at beating McAdams compared to the other candidates? As we've been talking about, yes, that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to make the case. He wants to turn this into a one-on-one race with McAdams. But that's what all the other candidates would love to have. I think Mohammed would love to have a one-on-one race again with McAdams. And Michael Farrell would love to have a one-on-one race, but that's not what we have. We have a four-way race in this primary, and there's no runoff measure. So it is likely that whoever wins this race is going to win with less than 50%. And McAdams is in the lead, but there's a big chunk of undecided voters, and that could swing the race. It's all going to depend on who returns those ballots. And, I'm going to write about this tomorrow, but there is a lot of outside spending coming into this race in support of Ben McAdams. There's a Democratic PAC that I think just dropped $1 million ad buy in support of McAdams. And then there's another one from, I think, a credit union PAC that's doing another sizable ad buy to support McAdams as well. So there's a lot of outside money coming in to sort of boost McAdams towards the end of this race. And that's what it's going to take, because again, I don't think that the Bluin has the kind of resources he would need to try and pry McAdams voters away from him. And Mohammed and Farrell certainly don't have those resources. BGunner93 on Instagram says, have you looked into the poll Nate's team funded, and was it done well / objective? I had some questions about the sample that they used, because their sample had like 80% white voters. That was the ethnic breakdown on the crosstabs. And I don't think that that's true. I don't have the exact ethnic breakdown for this new district among the voters. You can look at the ethnic breakdown for the district among the entire population, but not with registered voters. The data that I do have access to, that 80% of white voters seems off, because the data that I do have access to, which is directly linked to the voter rolls, shows about 65% of the voters, the Democratic voters in this district, are of European descent. And you can usually say that that's white. So I don't know if they got their sample right. I did hear from one person who thinks that they may have set those, set the demographics for their sample size. They may have been using the old 4th congressional district numbers, which would have been a huge mistake. Owen Mitchum on Instagram says, considering the open primary system, how did Bluin's poll match up with the historical partisan breakdown in the Democratic primary? I have reached out to the Salt Lake County Clerk's office just to see how many people who are not registered Democrats have requested a ballot. And the last I heard, it was about 1,000 voters, which is not very many at all. I expect that number to go up, and I'm going to have to probably reach out and try to get an updated number on that. But there were not a lot of non-Democrats who requested a ballot in this open primary. So I don't think that your question applies because the historical partisan breakdown, these were likely Democratic voters in the primary election in his poll. Now, again, I don't know if his sample was correct, especially in the ethnic breakdown, the ethnicity, because his sample had 80% white voters and about 3% Hispanic voters. And that does not seem right to me. And a lot of other people have questioned that as well. But we can talk about some other stuff. Jim's wife says, I'm registered independent. Can I vote in the primary still? You have to request a ballot. And you can go to the clerk's office, but the ballots are already in the mail. So you're probably going to have to do early balloting. When they do the early voting, you're going to probably have to show up in person and request a ballot. But if any registered voter can vote in this primary. Democrat, Republican, Independent, you just can't, if you're a Republican, you can't vote in a Republican primary. You have to vote in a Democratic in this primary only. So you can, but you have to request a ballot. And since the ballots have already been mailed out, I think we're past the point where you can get one mailed to you, and I think you're going to have to go to the clerk's office. But the best thing to do is probably call the Salt Lake County clerk's office and see what your options are. Like I said off the top of the show, I am not a registered Democrat, but I did request a ballot in this race, and it arrived today. Katie Did It on YouTube says Riley Owens is the GOP nominee from in Congressional District 1. Is his campaign well funded? I expect it could be. He's got some connections. He's part of a group that has popped up called the Doers Network, and I'm trying to look into that, but I know that group potentially is well funded because they are giving money to Republican candidates up and down the ballot this year. And so I know that they've got some money to throw around, and I suspect he will be well funded as well. The issue is the Doers Network is funding stuff on the state level, and he's a federal candidate, and there are all sorts of restrictions that the federal candidates have to abide by. Just getting a drink. Anyway. Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, looks like Wayback PAC is sending letters to everyone to help them request a Democratic ballot, which includes info on McAdams. Is Wayback PAC, I don't know what they are. I don't know how they are affiliated. I'll have to look into that. I did say that there is a big Democratic PAC, a national Democratic PAC. They just announced a $1 million ad buy. And I know there's a credit union group that's getting it. So there's a lot of outside money that's coming into this race on behalf of Ben McAdams. Anyway, these are all great questions. And if you want to continue to leave those in the chat, I will try to get them as quickly as possible. And I appreciate all the feedback. We've talked about Stuart Adams, and we can continue to talk a little bit about that, about his furious backpedaling on this data center because he knows it is a political liability and he's in trouble. We just talked about Nate Bluin's poll in the 1st Congressional District and his effort to try to get the other progressive candidates to get behind him, which is not going to happen. If you listen to their responses, it's not going to happen. And so I don't know what's going to happen. It means that everybody's still going to be campaigning until the very end. But let's talk a little bit about the debates that happened. As you know, I am not a fan of the Utah Debate Commission. I think that their format is terrible. I think their product is terrible. I think they have a lot of problems with how they approach it, the way that they put these things together. That being said, I thought the CD3 debate between Celeste Malloy and Phil Lyman was fantastic. And the reason why it was fantastic is because of the moderator, Thomas Wright, who did a tremendous job. He was so damn good. He was so much better than the other candidates. The other moderators. Max Roth was the moderator for the CD1 debate. Glenn Mills, former journalist, now communications guy and chief of staff for the Salt Lake City Police Department. He was the moderator for the CD2 debate between Blake Moore and Carrie Ann Lisenby. But Thomas Wright, he killed it. And I wrote last week that he was only put into that position because there was a last-minute flap over the scheduled moderator. Glenn Mills was scheduled to moderate that debate, and Natalie Gochner, who runs the Kim Gardner Institute up at the University of Utah, was scheduled to do the debate between Moore and Lisenby. Well, Lisenby's campaign objected to that because the Kim Gardner Institute, one of their major funders is the Boyer Company, and Blake Moore's father-in-law is the head of the Boyer Company. So they said there was a huge conflict of interest, so they had to do some rejiggering, and they got Thomas Wright in at the last second. And Thomas Wright was fantastic. Just look at the questions, the way that he started that debate compared to the other two. I think the first question from Max Roth in the CD1 debate was, why are you the best person to represent this? We had a similar question from Glenn Mills. And Thomas Wright immediately comes out and starts talking about data center. Just boom, boom, boom. Comes out guns blazing. Yes, that was fantastic. And not only did he do that, but he followed up on those questions, asking really pertinent questions about the data center. Let me see if I can pull up some of my notes about that, because I was really trying to dig into what Wright did. His first question was about data centers. He has another great question about data centers for his follow-up. Then we go straight into water policy. He has a fantastic question about water policy. Asking what is, and this was great. He asked both Phil Lyman and Celeste Malloy about water policy. He says, what is one thing that Congress can do to help with water policy in the West, to help with the drought in the West? And they kind of dance around it, and he didn't let him get away with it. He answered a follow-up question saying, you need to specifically answer this question, and force them into a corner. You don't see the other candidates, or excuse me, you don't see the other moderators doing that. And that's really sad, because Thomas Wright is not a journalist. He's a realtor. He's the and maybe the reason why he was so engaged with the two Republican candidates is because he's the former chair of the Republican Party and a former Republican gubernatorial candidate. So maybe they trusted him a little bit more than if you had a journalist in that spot, which would have been a more adversarial relationship. But Thomas didn't let them get away with anything. And that's why I thought his debate performance as the moderator was so great. He asked pointed questions on public lands. He said, who should have the greatest influence on public land? Should it be local communities, the federal government, or the state? And he says, but you need to choose one, and then explain the authority you would use as a member of Congress that would allow for that. Very specific questions. The other questions were very, milquetoast sort of generic questions that talked about the issue. So I was impressed with the job that Thomas Wright did. That doesn't forgive the format for the debate, which is terrible. 1 minute to answer a question is awful. It's so bad. I understand why they're putting student questions in, but I don't think that that's the right thing to do either, because it takes away from any flow you have. And so, again, I think Thomas Wright saved the debate and made it more watchable and made it more useful. He really did a great job. I cannot give him enough props for what he did, but that doesn't mean that I'm suddenly a fan of the Utah Debate Commission, because I don't like their format at all. So we can talk about that. I want to know what you thought about those debates and how they went. But those were my high level thoughts. I was really surprised watching the Blake Moore and Carrie Ann Lisenby debate. There was that question. It's an absolute layup about whether or not you would accept the $1 billion appropriation in Trump's budget for the Great Salt Lake, to help save the Great Salt Lake. That's a political layup. But Carrie Ann Lisenby said she would want to see what Congress would want to cut in order to make that $1 billion possible. And that right there, that is what happens when your brain has been melted by the John Birch Society. That's John Birch Society stuff right there, straight up. And it's such an easy political layup to say, yes, I want to do whatever. The answer is, I want to do whatever it takes to save the Great Salt Lake, and I will work with President Trump on this. I thought that Michael Farrell in the CD1 debate had the best answer. He said, we can name it the Great Trump Lake, but as long as we save this thing, because it's such an existential problem for the survival in Utah. Because if the Great Salt Lake dries up, that's pretty much it for Salt Lake City. So I was really surprised that she gave that answer to what is just a political layup. But that's what happens when you spend all of your time talking with Republican delegates and you don't have a tough election because you're only having to rely on the delegates to nominate you. Lisenby was unopposed in her last two elections for the legislature. She's not used to those kinds of questions. TC says Carrie Ann did better than Blake, I thought. It was not a great performance for Blake Moore. I will agree with you on that. He was stumbling around. I don't think he did enough to completely damage his chances. Sorry, something just making my nose. It's not a cocaine habit. I've got a dog laying on the floor behind me, and she's very hairy, and it's a lot of shedding that's happening. So I've got hair flying around, and it's causing my nose to itch. But anyway, I thought that Blake Moore's performance in those debates was not great. He was kind of all over the place, but I don't think that Lisenby really outshone him. She was much more forceful, but she did spend a lot of time reading. Ben McAdams also spent a lot of time reading his answers from their notes rather than speaking off the cuff. Moore was trying to speak off the cuff. I don't know how much he prepared for that debate, so I agree with you. It was not a great performance for Moore, but I don't think that Lisenby did enough to, make the case that she would be the better or the person to replace him in Washington, D.C. Owen Mitchum on Instagram says, I only watched the CD1 debate and was really disappointed by the questions. The format is somewhat understandable with a 1 hour time slot, but the questions were just completely empty. Let me tell you something. I've been speaking to someone who with knowledge about this. From what I understand, those questions are not written by the moderators. There is a list of questions that they are given that they get to choose from. And the questions that they are given to choose from, they are designed so that you can ask them to as many candidates as you want. You can't really ask a specific question that pertains to only one candidate. And that is a carryover from the previous iteration of the Utah Debate Commission. I've told this story before, but in 2022, during the U.S. Senate debate between Mike Lee and Evan McMullin, the Debate Commission reaches out to me and asks if I would like to come on stage and ask a question. I said, sure. I've got a question. I want to ask Senator Mike Lee about his role in January 6th, because to this day, he still has not completely answered that. And they said, well, no, the question has to go to both candidates. Well, that's not the question I want to ask. I would like to ask Senator Lee about that and then give Evan McMullin an opportunity to talk about that question. But since it was not a question I could give to both candidates, they rejected it, and I politely told them no thanks. So by design, a lot of these questions have to be broad enough that they can apply to everyone. I would like to see a format in which you can ask a candidate a specific question, and then the other candidates on stage have a chance to weigh in on that question or respond to what that person answers, knowing that they are also going to get very specific questions directed at them. I think that's the fair way to do it. You can't spend the entire debate just drilling one candidate with questions, but I think it's fair to ask a candidate a very direct question about something they've done or some policy they've advocated for or some position that they've taken, and then let the other candidates comment or respond to that. I think that's totally fair, but that's not the way that these debates are set up. Owen Mitchum also says not much effort to keep the candidates on topic either. That right there is a function of the debates and the restrictive format. 1 minute. And if you do the math, when you have 4 candidates on stage like you did in the 1st Congressional District, they got about 11 or 12 minutes. Ben McAdams, and the way the rules are set up is that if somebody mentions you, then you get a chance to respond to them up to 30 seconds. So Ben McAdams got a lot more speaking time, and he did make a joke about that and thanked his opponents for giving him extra speaking time during that. I want to look at some of these other questions here. R. Cameron on TikTok says, should Phil Lyman stop running for office? He can't seem to make much progress or win within his campaigns. I think that Lyman has an absolute shot to beat Malloy in this primary. His performance in that debate, I thought it was good. I thought neither candidate really, separated themselves. And this is a brand new district. This is the district that has changed the most with the new maps. There are about 600,000 potential voters overall who have not seen Celeste Malloy's name on a ballot because of the way that the districts have flown. Blake Moore, in the analysis that I did, he had the most voters from the old 1st Congressional District that he was representing carry over to the 2nd Congressional District. Celeste Malloy had the fewest voters carry over from her previous Congressional District, which was the 2nd, over to the new 3rd District. So there's a bunch of voters who have not seen her on the ballot, and it's all going to come down to turnout. But I think that Phil Lyman has a definite shot to beat her in this primary. I don't know how much money he has. I don't know how much what his resources are. I know she probably has a lot more than he does, but these are all rural areas. She's got that stronghold of St. George, which I think could help her carry her through, but he's got, the entire eastern side of the state that is familiar with him. Plus, they are familiar with him on a ballot, Republican voters especially, because he ran for governor in 2024, and he came within 10 points of Spencer Cox, which nobody expected. So I think that is going to be one to watch, and it could possibly happen. Ryan Hi-Fi on TikTok, evening Ryan, how are you? Says, Trump endorses Moore. What better reason to not support him? Has that happened? Has Trump endorsed him yet? I haven't seen if he's come in and done that yet. I know he endorsed Moore the last time around. He also endorsed Celeste Malloy, but I don't know if he's doing that. I don't know if he's weighed in on that race yet. I'll have to check. That's the perils of doing live internet TV shows, internet shows, because I'm not, able to obsessively watch social media like I normally do. So I haven't seen if he has endorsed them yet. I think that's going to be a big issue. I'm sure that both campaigns are reaching out to try to get Trump to endorse him. Same thing with Celeste Malloy and Phil Lyman. Moore, he's in Washington. He's got House leadership behind him. I'm sure that there's a lot of ears or a lot of people who are talking to Trump about issuing that endorsement. But but Carrie Ann Lisenby's team is also close to Trump. A lot of them were close to Trent Staggs, who got Trump's endorsement in that U.S. Senate race. Didn't quite work for Staggs in 2024 in the U.S. Senate race. John Curtis won that race, but Staggs did get Trump's endorsement. I expect if Trump's going to endorse, he'll probably do it in the next week or so. But I think that could be a deciding factor. But I'm guessing everybody's trying to get his endorsement. Trump's endorsement is very... it's the magic touch in a lot of Republican primaries, but here in Utah, I don't know what weight it carries simply because Utah is the least pro-Trump red state in the union. And election results show that. He does not have the overwhelming electoral power that he's had in the past here. Remember, in 2016, he actually finished 3rd in the GOP primary when he ran the first time. Ted Cruz won the Utah primary or the primary vote, or they had some stupid online vote in the Republican Party that was a complete disaster. And I don't think we still know for certain who won that, but it was, pardon my French, an absolute shit show. It was so bad. And Trump finished 3rd in that behind Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. Ted Cruz and Rubio actually came here to campaign during that race. So anyway, we've talked about the debates. We've talked a little bit about that poll in the 1st Congressional District. And by the way, somebody I posted a video last week talking about Ben McAdams being the front runner going into the debate, and he came out of the debate the front runner. And I had somebody on Instagram just lay into me saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, and that how can I call Ben McAdams the front runner when Laban Mohammed won at convention? And then we get this poll that comes out that shows Ben McAdams is the front runner. So to that person, and you know who you are, and I don't know if you're watching, but if you are, that person, I say, I am always right. And the sooner you realize that I know what I'm talking about and that I am a friggin' genius, the better it's going to go for both of us. Because I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends. There's a lot of stuff we can talk about. We've got a question here from JK on YouTube. Evening, JK. How are you doing? He writes, does it feel like Lisenby isn't really differentiating herself from Moore in any noticeable enough way? As far as I can tell, she isn't picking a different lane like America First on foreign policy. Her entire campaign is kind of built around backlash to Prop 4. And as I've said before, it's a backlash to Prop 4 and the new congressional maps. And as I said before, I just don't know how mad the wider universe of Republican primary voters are. I'm going to be watching those results in that district very, very carefully because, I don't think, I would guess that she doesn't come within 10 points of Blake Moore. And we've seen him release some internal polling that shows him with like 67%, which, is just an absolute ass kicking. Again, it's an internal poll. Take those with a grain of salt. But I don't suspect that she will come within 10 points of him because that's her main issue. The whole Salt Lake Blake thing. And we'll talk about that. I wrote a story about that today. But the whole Salt Lake Blake and that he's responsible for these new maps. I just don't know how much people are angry about that outside of the really hardcore base of Republican voters. Now, Moore's got to hope that it's more than just the hardcore base of Republican voters who show up to vote, but it's going to be really hard for her. So I don't, but I agree with you. I don't think she's doing enough to really differentiate herself from Moore. She certainly didn't do that in the debate, other than the fact that I live in the district, which is the other part of her pitch to voters. And I don't know how much that really plays because Utah voters are used to voting for people who do not live in the district. Kelly Maw on TikTok says, since most of us just learned what MIDA is, what steps could be taken to limit their power? You're going to have to get the law changed. It's in statute. Now, one could argue that they have gone way beyond what was originally intended by the statute. Just look at building a luxury hotel at Deer Valley, and the way that it's supposed to benefit the military is that military members and veterans can get a discount. You can make that argument that they have gone far beyond what their statutory authority was. But there's not a lot that you can do since the members are appointed. You're going to have to get the law changed. And I can guarantee you, as long as it's Stuart Adams is the president of the Senate and in charge of MIDA, you ain't going to get that law changed. That's not going to happen. But that's how you do it. You cannot, they are in statute. It was written in statute. And so you're going to have to change it. Or you need a governor who's going to crack down on it, or you need people who demand it. But I can guarantee you that people are paying more attention to what they're doing now, and they're probably going to have a lot more people show up to their meetings. Their meeting last month, they canceled at the last minute. So we'll see if they show up for their meeting this month. I don't know if that the outrage over this has died down, but a lot more people are aware of them and what they're doing. And, the more eyes they have on them, the less likely they are to try to get up to some shenanigans like this. Rod B. Mosier on Instagram says the legislature has called special session after special session to override or change ballot initiatives, but they won't do anything to corral MIDA. They actually expanded MIDA a couple of years ago, expanded their authority. That's one of the things when lawmakers start to crack when candidates or members of the legislature have complained about MIDA in light of this Box Elder thing. People are saying, yeah, but you voted for MIDA. You voted for an expansion. It's already there. And that was before any of this stuff happened. It's sort of a bad faith argument. But yeah, it's going to take a change in the legislature to try and rein in MIDA or change what they do. You're going to have to change the law. Kelly Moss says, will you be covering that next meeting? If they have one, I'm sure I won't be the only person who covers it. But we'll have to see when they put the notice out. There's a place on Utah called the Public Notice website. Let's see if I can pull this up. I'll give you the website. If you go to utah.gov, the website is utah.gov/PMN. Peter Mayonnaise Nougat. I don't know what the military numbers are, so it's PMN. So utah.gov/PMN. And you can find out when all of the public meetings for all of the governmental agencies are. You can sign up for them. You can even put in your address and they'll tell you what meetings are happening around you and when they are and how to access them. So go to that website if you want to find out. That's where you find out where MIDA's next meeting is. You'll have to do a search. The best way to search is just put in the word military. I'll do that right now. MIDA stands for Military Installation Development Authority. And let's see what we have here in terms of their upcoming meetings. They some of their public infrastructure districts, those are the sub-districts that they have. Some of their meetings are happening this month. The next MIDA board meeting, it looks like we do not have one scheduled right now. I don't see when the next MIDA board meeting is scheduled. The last one was scheduled for May 19th. And that's the one that they canceled. But they do not have another MIDA board meeting scheduled yet at this point, at least until September. And the search that I just did was until mid-September. So they're probably not going to have another meeting for a few months. And I think they only meet quarterly. So the next one is probably in September, or I'm not sure when it is. But that's the best way to find out about it. If you go to that website, utah.gov/PMN. That's the public notice website. And you can find out about all sorts of interesting stuff. Katie Did It on YouTube says, was the inland port a MIDA project? No, it wasn't. That is a completely different thing, and they've got a completely different board that's in charge of that. That's kind of the baby of Senator Steve Stevenson, who is retiring after this session. After this year, he's not running for re-election. That's kind of his thing. But yeah, the inland port was not a MIDA thing, but that was also created by the legislature. And guess what? You can find out about their meetings on that public notice website. Katie Did It asks again, was MIDA the creator of the controversial Salt Lake County Inland Port? No, they weren't. That was a completely different thing that the legislature did. So, take another drink here. Made some Brazilian lemonade tonight. I don't know if you've ever done that. It's fantastic. They call it Brazilian lemonade, but it's made with limes. Anyway, it's good. Good stuff. I can't have too much of it, but it is great. So, one of my favorite drinks during the summer. Okay, what else is there to talk about? We talked about Stuart Adams and his panic move trying to scale back the data center because he knows that he is in trouble in this upcoming primary. And what a seismic event that would be if he were to lose his re-election bid and it was the data center that did it. I think that would put a lot of people on notice. And really, that's the only kind of thing that really gets the attention of lawmakers. That is a safe Republican seat. That is a rock-solid Republican seat. Whoever wins the Republican nomination there is probably going to be elected to the legislature. But as I've been pointing out, this is the first ever primary that Adams has ever been in. He's never had a challenger like this. This is the first time he's ever had, he failed to get at least 60% at the convention vote. He only got 55%, and that allowed another candidate to get into that three-way primary he's in. And so this is a really tough election. And this data center issue is really coming back to bite him in the butt. And he knows he's in trouble, and that's why he sent that letter to Kevin O'Leary on Monday, which just so happened to be the day that ballots were put into the mail, asking him to scale back the inland port. That was a political move. As I said, that was a move to cover his ass. Rod Mosier says transparent.utah.gov. Now, what that website is for, that's where you can dig into the financials. You can look and see which vendors are getting paid, how much people are getting paid, who the highest paid employees are. You can dig into some of the transactions of different governmental entities. I find that also a very useful website. The auditor's office, when John Dougal was the auditor, they're the ones who really established that, and that has been continued under Tina Cannon. In fact, she put out a whole dashboard about MITA, and you should probably spend some time looking into that, because that's got some really good information as well. And so I applaud her for doing that. Also, Tina Cannon probably doesn't have much incentive to help Stuart Adams out in this, after the fact that he's tried to evict her from her offices in the state capitol for the past couple of years in order to create more office space for Republican senators, part-time Republican senators in the Capitol. So, when I saw that she was doing this whole dashboard so you can dig into the MITA spending, and her response, when people asked her about it, she said, my responsibility is to the voters. I'm guessing a lot of that is the fact that there's no love lost between her and Stuart Adams, who has been doing everything he could to try and kick her out of her offices in the Capitol and turn that area into office space for Republican senators, so they don't have to be in the building that's 30 feet away or 30 steps away from the Capitol itself. DJ the Gull says, transparency website support will help citizens connect their own apps and databases to the data. Yes, there's also a thing that you can do if you are a legitimate researcher. I have got back-end access to that. I have what they called super user access, because I'm a journalist and I use it for journalistic purposes. And I can query the database, do an SQL query of the database. I've had to teach myself that stuff because I'm not very good at it, but I've been able to do some reporting based on that and dig into a lot of the spending on some of the state entities. So I would spend some time, if you're interested to see what your government is spending its money on, go over to transparent.utah.gov and take a look at that. Rod Moser points out what I've been talking about, MITA projects there now. Yeah, there's a whole dashboard where you can dig into what MITA's been spending and who they've been giving that money to. Very, very useful stuff. I don't know if you saw it today, but I wrote a story about a shadowy super PAC, brand new super PAC, federal PAC, that has been doing some attack ads against Blake Moore in the 2nd Congressional District. And it had to do some digging. I first saw these guys on Twitter when they were they tagged the Utah Political Watch account on Twitter. That's how they got my attention. They've got like 150 followers on Twitter, but they have these AI slop ads attacking Blake Moore as Salt Lake Blake, that because he lives in Salt Lake City, but he's running in the 2nd Congressional District. He's not running in the district where he's at. And so I tried to look into who this PAC was. They call themselves Defending Conservative Values PAC. There's another PAC that was called Defending Conservative Values, not the same one, on the FEC website. They had to add the word PAC to it. So I was looking at their filings. They first filed, I think, on May 9th. That was the first time that they filed. And then they updated the filing a couple of weeks later with their website, which just has these AI slop generated ads attacking Blake Moore. but there's not a lot of information about them. Just 2 days after they formed the federal PAC, a state PAC by the same name was registered here in Utah. The treasurer of the group, the only person that I could find associated with the group, is a guy named Thomas Datweiler. Thomas Datweiler is he is the accountant for so many Republican campaigns. And he, in a lot of these Republican campaigns, he is the official person who is the treasurer. He's had a lot of legal troubles. He's been nailed for being playing fast and loose with some of these rules. But Thomas Datweiler, only person who's with these PACs. And he's not going to tell me who's behind him. He has no obligation to do that. So it's really hard to figure out who they are. Well, they made a bit of a clerical error, or at least they're calling it a clerical error, but it gives us some clues as to who's behind this thing. And wouldn't you know it, it looks like somebody, one of Senator Mike Lee's longtime political confidants is behind this effort. They say it, maybe not, but they didn't actually deny it when they asked them about it. What happened is, when you get this close to an election, candidates and outside groups have to file what they call a 48-hour notice. If you get a donation of $1,000 or more, if you're a candidate, you have to file a disclosure within 48 hours. If you are an outside group like this Super PAC, this Defending Conservative Utah Value, or Defending Conservative Values PAC, if you make an independent expenditure in a federal race this close to the primary within a certain window, you also have to disclose that in a 48-hour notice. And what happened was, they are disclosing who they spent the money with. And what they did was, there were two filings. One came on Monday, one came on Tuesday. And they made a payment to this group, a company called Conservative Action Group. So I saw that come up on Monday, and I'm like, Conservative Action Group. So I start digging, trying to figure out where this company is. And I find a company called Conservative Action Group that was incorporated in Wyoming in March. And why Wyoming? Well, Wyoming has some of the most business-friendly laws that make it so you don't have to disclose who owns a company. This company is incorporated in Wyoming. Another dead end. You look at the filings, and it just basically lists it's a shell corporation. And in their actual business filing, their address is a virtual office in Casper, Wyoming. The only person on the filings is a person named Lavette Dobson. And last year, Inc.com reported that Lavette Dobson, their name is on over 45,000 business filings across the country. So it's just basically a company that helps you set up LLCs. And so that was also a dead end. But on this 48-hour filing that was posted with the FEC, it listed an address for this company, Conservative Action Group, in Alpine, Utah. Now, that's the first time I've seen any connection to Utah from this Super PAC. Everything else, Thomas Datweiler is in Wisconsin. That's where he lives. That's his address on their filings. And the business, this Conservative Action Group, is incorporated in Wyoming. But all of a sudden, here's an address for Conservative Action Group in Alpine, Utah. So I start looking. Publicly available databases, property records. And that is the street address of Dan Hauser. Dan Hauser is Senator Mike Lee's chief strategist. He was on Lee's Senate payroll until last year. He has a company called L4 Consulting that has taken in hundreds of thousands of dollars from Lee's campaign and other PACs that have helped Lee out in the past. So I'm kind of, I feel like I'm on a good path that, I feel like I'm on the right path of trying to figure out who this is. So I reach out to Dan Hauser and I text him and I said, hey, this is what I found. This company that's registered in Wyoming, it's using your home address as the street address for this company who has just been paid by this PAC. He texts me back, and Dan Houser is not a fan of mine. He and I have tangled many, many times in the past because he doesn't like what I report about his boss and friend, Senator Mike Lee. But he texts me back. First of all, points out that he's on vacation with his wife in Bora Bora to celebrate their anniversary, which has nothing to do with this. But he says that looks like a clerical error. He says he looks into it, and Datweiler, the treasurer for the group, made an error and put down the wrong address. And so I reached out to Datweiler, and Datweiler says, yeah, that's what happened. But I went back to Houser. I texted him again and specifically said, hey, just to be clear, are you denying that you have anything to do with this company? Are you denying that you are involved with this company, this Conservative Action Group company, that your home address is listed as their address? I just asked him straight up, yes or no, is this you? And the thing he sent to me is he wouldn't answer. He would not say no. His text to me read, go ahead and link me personally to whatever entity you would like that is working to get an actual conservative to represent that district. Blake Moore has been a failure at that. That's not a denial. That is not a denial. So I'm pretty confident that Dan Houser, Senator Mike Lee's political guy, and Mike Lee's is involved in this effort to attack Blake Moore. Interesting. It's not surprising because I think that Mike Lee, again, I don't think that Mike Lee is involved in this at all. I don't think that Mike Lee is involved in this effort. If you go through his social media, he hasn't really said anything about this race. But it is curious that his top political guy appears to be knee-deep in this thing. Anyway, that's the investigative piece that I published today. You can go over to my website, utahpolitics.news, and read it, and I would encourage that you do that. Question on Instagram from Yakov Bush. He says, why don't you like Nate Bluin, or I misunderstand your position? A fan, just curious. It doesn't matter whether I like someone or I don't like someone. Someone who is a fan of Nate Bluin's has tried to insinuate that I'm more friendly to other candidates. I am friendly with a lot of people that I cover, but I'm not friends with them. I'm friendly with Nate Bluin, but I do not consider him a friend. And the reason why I do that is because I might have to write something that is critical of them or something that they don't like. And I don't want friendship to make me pull a punch. I am terrified that I will pull a punch. And so it doesn't matter whether I like Nate Bluin or not. I'm friendly with Nate Bluin. He and I have, we have a good relationship, but it is a relationship between reporter and elected official. So if your perception is that I don't like him, I can't tell you you're wrong, because that is your perception, and I can't tell you that your perception, the way that you're viewing something, is wrong. All I can say is I don't agree with that perception of him. It's not that I don't like him, and I'm not going to say that I like him or not, because that doesn't matter. I'm friendly with him. I am friendly with Ben McAdams. I am friendly with Liban Mohammed. I am friendly with Michael Farrell. But we're not friends. I'm not friends with them. And so that's all I can say about that. It doesn't, it's not that I don't like somebody. I don't see that as something that it's something. I try to keep, I'll put it this way. Again, it's just that I tell everyone the rule is we can be friends, we can be friendly, but we are not friends. And that rule has led to some fracturing of relationships. I told that to Speaker Mike Schultz many, many years ago, before he became Speaker. I said, my rule is always this: we can be friendly, but we are not friends. And that came to a head when I wrote something that he did not like. He objected to it, and we really haven't talked since. Although he did call me last week when I was looking into a story that I decided not to move forward with because I didn't think there was a story there. So I hope that answers your question. I can't really explain it any other way. El Sirax, I hope I'm saying that right, on YouTube says, I wonder if the Hawaiian legislation to hinder corporation PAC spending gains momentum, if we could see it take root here as well. No. It's going to take a drastic change in the makeup of the Utah legislature to change our campaign finance laws. We have some of the loosest campaign finance laws in the country. You can take as much money from anybody. You can take, and anybody can give an unlimited amount of money to a candidate. You just have to disclose it. You see donations of $50,000, $100,000. Why would they change that? Why would they tie their own hands? You're going to need some people who are willing to not vote in their own self-interest. When you are a candidate, when you're an incumbent, you raise a lot of money. And really, we don't need corporate PAC spending changes here in Utah anyway, when the corporations can just give directly to candidates. You don't need that independent spending that much. Lo-Fi Mexican on TikTok says, it's Lo-Fi Mexican cooking, on TikTok. I love hearing conservatives shout about how other conservatives aren't conservative enough. That's part of the thing that's happening with these attack ads on Blake Moore. I kind of enjoyed that story. It's really fun when I'm doing a story and I've got notes and I'm looking into this PAC. This PAC has been on my radar. This conservative. This defending conservative values PAC has been on my radar since last month, and they've been doing these AI generated ads attacking Blake Moore, and I give them a cursory look, but they're on my radar. And then I get an alert that this filing has happened. And when I look into it and all of a sudden I see a Utah address, I get a little excited because then I've got another little nugget that I can dig into and advance the story. And that's what led to this story today. I had fun writing that because I think it's important that who is paying for these ads and where these ads are coming from. Let's see. Michelin says, when do polls start reporting results? That will be election night. I think the polls close at 8 o'clock. And that's when we will start to get the first round of results coming back. I plan on being live on election night. That's 3 weeks from tonight. 3 weeks from tonight is when I plan on. So I will be live that night going over the election results with you. So we can talk about that, talk about what's happening in all of these races. So if you want to hang out with someone on election night to talk about about the results as they roll in, come on over here. In fact, I might try to set it up where we can take calls. I think I can do that. I'm not promising anything. There's some technical involvement, but I'll try to see if there's a way that we can take some calls on that. But I'll try to do that. Michelin says, and this is a question from TikTok, do you think McAdams has a strong lead, and who do you expect to lose big time? What are you hearing in general? Really, the only data point we have right now in that first congressional district race, the most recent data point, is that poll that came out from Nate Bluen yesterday. And I talked about that earlier. McAdams does have a lead. He's at about 36%. But if you add the leaners in, he's at 37%. Bluen's at 26% with a 1% lean. So that's 27%. But if you dig into the internals on that poll, you will see that let me see if I can pull those up. I've got them here. Where did those go? I got a whole bunch of. I got to find that in my library here. But if you dig into it, here we go. So let's look at some of the internals of this poll to what I'm talking about. So, in this poll, there's some indications that support for McAdams might be a little bit soft, and there's some indication that there's support for Bluin that might be a little bit soft. One of the questions in this poll says, how certain are you that you would vote for the certain candidate? Are you very certain, somewhat certain, or not certain at all? So for McAdams, now remember, he is at 37%. 19% of that are strong McAdams supporters, but 18% are weak McAdams supporters. So that's 18% that are gettable by the other candidates. And so that's why I think this thing is up in the air. I still think that Ben McAdams is the front runner, but if this poll is showing 18% that support is not solid, those are voters who are gettable by other candidates. It's going to take a lot of communication to get to them, and I don't know if Nate Bluin has the resources to do that. I don't know if Libon Mohammed or if Michael Farrell have the resources to get to those candidates. On the other side, Bluin's support, he's at 27%. In this poll, his support is even weaker than McAdams. Only 13% of that are strong Bluin supporters, and 14% are weak Bluin supporters. So again, Bluin's got to worry about hanging on to that 14% while also trying to, get to pry voters away from the other candidates, or get the undecided candidates to come over to his column, or try to pry away voters from Ben McAdams. So this thing is still completely up in the air. I don't think it is 100% for certain that Ben McAdams wins this race. I'm not a bad betting man, and I wouldn't put any money down on this because anything can happen. It depends 100% on turnout and what kind of communication efforts we see over these last 3 weeks. But time is ticking because ballots are already in the hands of voters. And so I don't know, I don't know how this is going to play out, but I do think it is significant that a large portion of the vote in this poll, and once again, it is a Nate Bluin internal poll, so you have to take it with a grain of salt, but in this poll, and almost half of McAdams supporters are weak supporters, almost half of Bluin supporters are weak supporters. Those are voters who could change their minds. So this thing is still very, very fluid. Jaden Weeks says, how big was the sample size? It was 402 voters. It's got a margin of error of around 5%, which is what you would expect. It's a scientific poll. As we talked about earlier in the show, there are people who said that there are some possibilities that the sample that Bluin had was not correctly, it didn't match the demographics of the district correctly, because if you look at the ethnic breakdown, 80% of the voters were white that they polled. And I don't know if that's true. The only data that I have among the voter, among the voter database that I have access to shows about 65% of the Democratic voters in this new 1st Congressional District are of European descent, which, means white for the most part. So I don't know if that is incorrect. He's only got 10% Hispanic, 6% Black. And so there are people who have raised questions about that sample. But people are going to nitpick all sorts of these things. People are going to nitpick all of these polls to try to find fault with them. Owen Mitchum on YouTube says, wasn't this poll only 400 sample size? Not sure you can draw too much from the poll beyond the top line numbers with a sample that small. That agree 100%, and good on you for knowing that about polling. It's a very small sample size, and if you dig anything below that, although I think that you can look at the whether they were strong supporters or weak supporters of a certain candidate, because you're just drilling in on their original answers in the top line. So I think that we can look at that, but for the rest of it, I agree with you 100%. You really can't look anything beyond that simply because of the small sample size, but you could say that about pretty much any poll. Jaden Week says, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to go with that. Let's see. Yakov Bush says it was likely voters in the primary. This was covered in the comments on this post on Instagram. We've been talking a little bit about that. Yes. SLOEC on Instagram says, is there going to be a swing away from Ben McAdams because of his stock in a Southern Utah data center, much like there was a swing away from Nate due to his online comments? How much of a swing? I don't know. What we're learning is that the data center issue is a very potent political issue, but I don't know how potent it's going to be in this race. It could be, and that's why I said I'm really not, I'm not certain what's going to happen in this race, and I'm not making any predictions. I would say that right now, from the data points we have, Ben McAdams is the front runner, but he's certainly not at 50%. He certainly doesn't have an overwhelming lead on the rest of the field. Anything can happen in these 3 weeks, but a lot of the time to make your case about issues like that, for the opponents to make the case about issues like that, is starting to dwindle because people have already sent their ballots back in. They really have. Let's see. Looks like there's a back and forth. Elliot Nutter says, did I hear you in the media section of Malloy Lyman? If so, hope you had a good time. I enjoy going to these sorts of things. Yes, I was there. I got to get in the media scrum. I appreciate that they put 10 minutes out, but they stick to that 10 minutes, which is fair. That way you're not, one candidate isn't having to stand there and answer questions. But yeah, I do that. I did enjoy going up there, and I appreciated that. El Cirex on YouTube says, by the way, for all your hard work, I'm glad to have you as one of my main news sources. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's why I do this. That is why I do this. And you know what? I think that's probably a good point to leave it at. Or the piece of wild things. I'm going to do this one here. Similarly, there could be a swing away from Muhammad for doing data center lobbying for Meta. That is another issue. I'm going to be really fascinated to see how this data center thing plays out. And it could impact 2 big races here. Certainly the Republican race in Senate District 7 with President Stuart Adams. He knows that this issue it's hitting him hard. And that is why he sent that letter yesterday to Kevin O'Leary demanding, I'm going to put demanding in quotes because he can't demand anything. He doesn't have the authority to do that. And by the way, he's the one who did the deal with O'Leary in the first place as the head of MITA, but he knows how potent this issue is. So that's the first one where you need to really pay attention to see how this could play out. The second one is in this first congressional district because 2 of the candidates have ties to data centers, and I don't know how much that's going to hurt them. But again, if you want to hurt the other candidates, if you want to make this an issue, you need to start communicating that if you are a candidate. And again, Ben McAdams right now has the most resources, and he's got outside groups about to pour a lot of money in this race to support him. I think there was a $1 million ad buy by a Democratic PAC that's coming into this race. And then there's the credit unions are also doing a national credit union group has done a big buy, pouring some money in this race to also help him out. Because in a lot of cases, this is the ball game for a lot of these races, especially in CD1, CD2, and CD3. This is the ball game. The primary is the ball game. Owen Mitchum on YouTube says, I saw you in the audience at the CD1 debate. Were you invited by one of the candidates, or were you given a separate press ticket? I was there as a member of the press. I was a credentialed member of the press. I wasn't there as any invitee of the candidates, and if a candidate had invited me, I would have said no. I just don't think that that's proper. That's not my job. And I wouldn't have been able to ask any questions either because that's only open to members of the press, and I was part of the press scrum afterwards. So, yeah, I was there as a member of the press. I wasn't there invited by any of the candidates. And if a candidate had invited me to be their guest, as I said, I would have said no. I want to put this out there. I'm going to put this out there again. Speaking of inviting, And I know Todd Weiler has said that they can't do this, but I don't care because I've seen members of the legislature sitting in boxes at the Jazz game, have meetings at boxes at the Jazz game. I know they've been there, so I want to know how they get around that. But if there's any member of the legislature who is very concerned about who's very concerned about preserving women's sports, let's go to a Utah Royals match together when they get off the summer break. They're back in July. Or let's go up and see the Utah Talons, the brand new softball team, the pro softball team. They're going to be playing up at the University of Utah. Let's go. I will go with you. I want to spend some time watching. I want to support women's sports, and I want to help you support women's sports. I want to facilitate your deep love of women's sports. So let's do it. Reach out to me. Let's go to a Royals game. Let's go see the Utah Talons, the new softball team. I'm excited about that because I went to the University of Oklahoma. I'm a huge fan of their softball team. Season didn't end the way that we wanted it to, but the Utah Talons have Jada Coleman, who was on that 4-time national championship team. She's great, and I'm super excited to have the opportunity to see her play in Salt Lake City. I want to go see when Chicago comes to town because they've got Jocelyn Allo, the home run queen from Oklahoma. I want to see these players. It's great. It is so much fun to watch women's softball. Clint Okerlund, representative. I think you're in HD 43, if that's correct. Representative Clint Okerlund says, I'm down. I'll pay my own way. Reach out to me. You're on, buddy. Let's go. You are on. We will go to either the Royals when they get back from their summer break. Royals almost in first place. They got screwed by a late penalty call in that contest against Portland, the last game before the break. They were dominating Portland, and Portland's in first place. Royals look good, man. Bad time for them to be taking a almost 2-month break for the World Cup. But that summer break is happening, so we're not going to see them again. But they look fantastic right now. But like I said, they got screwed by that really soft penalty call at the end. So anyway, Representative Okerlund, you are on. Let's make that happen. We'll do that. And you know what? We should actually just make it a night. Everybody pays their own way, and we just all go to one of these matches because I think it's a lot of fun. I'm really excited about the pro softball league that's starting, the Utah Talons. Anyway, let's see. Let's see. A couple of other questions here. Michelin on TikTok says, did they finally give you access to the Capitol? Not yet. We are waiting to hear from the 10th Circuit on my appeal. That could come any day. When we finally hear, and if it goes my way, we will have a live stream to talk about it. We will go over it. So watch these channels. It'll probably be scheduled really, really quick, but I haven't heard anything yet. But we are the oral arguments in front of the 10th Circuit were back in March. It was 2 months ago, and my lawyers say it usually takes the 10th Circuit between 2 and 3 months to issue a ruling. So we're hoping, and as I said before, they really, my lawyers feel good about how things went. Let's see. Danette on TikTok says, how's your dog? Off topic, but wondering. That's Murphy. She's still here. She's actually lying in the doorway. I know you can't see her on screen. Murphy has cancer, and some of it is spreading a little bit to her brain, and she started to have some seizures. And she's not the dog that we've had. You know, things are changing, and it's taking a toll, and it's hard because she's not the dog that I've known for. She's going to be 11 this year. She's had a great life, but she now spends she's morphed from a very independent dog who spends the day outside. My wife and I joke, we have a large backyard, large garden area. And she spends the time out there. She used to spend the time out there. We used to call it ranching because she's a ranch dog, so she would be out on the ranch. She's turned into my shadow. Since these seizures have happened, she just wants to be right next to me all the time, which is nice, but it's not the dog that I've known for these 11 years. She's still here, but I'm just thankful for the time I have left with her. I'll just say that. I'm just thankful for whatever time we have. It's hard to watch her slip away a little bit every day, and she's changing. But, thanks for asking, and she's still here. Michelin says, do you sell t-shirts with your name and news brand on it? I wish that I had a great idea for that. I don't have any ideas for what to do for merch. I'd love to do that. I'd love to get that out there. If anybody has any ideas or wants to, help design something, I'm not asking anybody to do it for free. I do pay people for their ideas. I believe in paying you if you do creative work. I can't afford much, but I could probably find some budget somewhere if somebody had a great idea that I wanted to use for some merch. So I'm looking for your submission. So if you know a graphic designer out there, hit me up and let's talk. I appreciate that. Let's see. Jessica Lee says, Boomer Sooner. Boomer Sooner. Less than 100 days until football. Yep. This team has broken my heart for years and years and years, but I keep coming back. It's like I said, I am in an emotionally abusive relationship with the Oklahoma Sooners. So, but aren't we all? My son is a huge Arsenal fan, and they finally won the league this year, and that was a really neat moment for him. He lives down in Phoenix. Really neat moment for him to finally watch them win the league after all these years of heartbreak. And I said, for once, Arsenal doesn't equal pain. For most of the rest of your life, it's going to be painful watching them. But at least for now, it's not pain because they are the champions. Jessica Lee says, I'm a Tennessee Vols fan. LOL, I get it. It's been rough since 1998. Yep. It's tough. It's tough. When I was in college, I actually went to a game at Neyland Stadium. We drove down there. I just wanted to experience it. That was back in the late 80s, early 90s. We just got a road trip from Norman and just went down there. What an incredible stadium. And that was back in the 80s. It was huge. Fantastic. I love that atmosphere. I've recently been back to the University of Oklahoma a couple of times since I graduated, and the stadium has gotten so much bigger. So much bigger. I used to live, I was a resident advisor in the athletic dorms when they did have athletic dorms that were right across the street from the stadium. They're not there anymore. I lived with the men's gymnastics team the year that they won the national championship. We called them the Flippers. Quick story. There was a guy on that team by the name of Tom Meadows. I think he has a gym down in Houston right now. And a lot of his students at that gym are on the Olympic team or have made the Olympic team. One night we were sitting around in the dorms, just watching TV, whatever. And Tom was, he had an issue of the USA Gymnastics magazine back when the magazine was a big thing. Now, remind you, this was late 80s. But he's doing the crossword, right? He was doing the a crossword, and he's filling it out. And then all of a sudden he looks up and he goes, who was the national juniors champion in this all around or whatever event in 1980 something? He looks up and he goes, me. And that was correct. He was the answer to the crossword. I still remember that moment fondly. Jessica Lee says the Vols head coach is an Oklahoma alumni also. It's Josh Heupel. He's not just an Oklahoma alumnus. He's the last quarterback to win a national championship for Oklahoma. Josh Heupel, yeah, he was great. He won the national championship in 2000. He was a quarterback on that team. So, yeah, he came back to Oklahoma. It didn't go well when he was the offensive coordinator there. They had to fire him. Anyway, I think we've gotten way too far off track. This is not Oklahoma Sooners talk. I do appreciate it. I could talk about it all the time. But anyway, that's going to do it. That's going to do it for tonight. Hey, I appreciate everybody surfing in, your attention, your questions, your comments. It's all appreciated. My email is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me with any other questions that you have. Also, you can see all of my social handles. You can DM me there. I am available at all of those places. I am an independent journalist. I do not have corporate backers for Utah Political Watch, which you can find at utahpolitics.news. I do not have billionaire donors. This site, what I do, is completely funded by my readers and subscribers. And I am so very thankful for them. That allows me to continue doing what I'm doing, the kind of investigations that I like, the one I published today, which took me most of the day to do a lot of the digging and figure out who this company was and dig through those records. All of that is made possible by you. And if you want to support what I do, you can go to my website, utahpolitics.news, become a subscriber. It's like $55 a year. You get some free stuff that free readers don't, or you can throw a couple of bucks in the tip jar. All of it goes to help keep me doing what I'm doing. If you like this live stream, if you want to make it possible, same thing. That allows for that. Anyway, again, thank you everybody who is a reader and a subscriber of my stuff. It means more to me than you will ever know. Anyone who reaches out to me, everyone who reaches out and gives me a compliment through a DM or an email, I appreciate you so much. And I do say, this means a lot to me. It means so much to me that people appreciate what I do, and they want to read my work, and they want to help me keep doing it. So that's going to do it for this evening. I hope you all have a great night. Again, utahpolitics.news. That's the best way to find my newsletter, find all of my journalism. It's all right there for you. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can become a subscriber. You can throw some money in the tip jar if you want to support what I'm doing. I appreciate all of it. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great rest of the week. If anything pops, we'll probably have another live stream later in the week. But once again, thank you everybody for watching. Have a great evening, great rest of the week, and we will talk to you again soon. Good night, everybody.